Bird photography is a hobby enjoyed by countless individuals worldwide. People can't get enough of striving to improve their shots and immortalizing a specific natural moment in time forever. While bird photography can certainly be an attractive hobby, there may be a darker side to it that many people aren't aware of. Before you start angrily typing a comment, you need to hear me out for a second. Could bird photography actually be bad for birds? A recent incident from the Saxon Bog in Minnesota left both birders and photographers alike stunned. A snowy owl that had been frequenting the bog had died in a very unusual way. This bird that had gained much attention throughout the course of the winter was hit by a train. What seems to have happened was that the snowy owl was sitting on the railroad tracks and for whatever reason failed to move when the train came. Almost immediately, memorial posts flooded Facebook groups, consisting of close-up images of the snowy owl when it was still alive. However, not all posts were mournful. In fact, some were rather angry and pointed the finger at bird photographers for causing the owl's untimely demise. But how could photographers of all people possibly be responsible for this tragedy? As it turns out, there have been issues with photographers potentially harming wildlife for years, with practices that at first might seem innocuous. Let's start by talking more about the owl. Owls are very sensitive to stress and human disturbance. Anecdotally, people say owls that are being watched by humans sometimes don't go about hunting as they perceive the human or humans to be a potential threat. If the birds aren't actively hunting, then they can't keep their energy up and won't be able to go about their daily lives in the normal way. Watching a bird for too long is one thing, but some photographers take it a step further and actively disturb birds to try and get a particular shot. There have been numerous instances of people getting way too close to birds, causing them to flush, or even worse, deliberately trying to get them to flush so they can get pictures of the birds in flight. For these reasons, some Facebook groups have even banned posting photos of owls to try and dissuade people from putting pressure on these birds' roosting sites. In terms of this snowy owl, some people hypothesize that the amount of stress put on it by birders and photographers was a big reason that it failed to get out of the way in time, as it may have been in shock or had too little energy to escape. While sensitive species often take a hit when disturbed by humans looking to get a great shot, more common birds are also in peril, especially during their nesting season. Consistent disruptions to nesting birds have been noted to cause these birds to abandon their nests, thus forcing them to use more energy making a new nest, or sometimes causing their nesting efforts to be a failure altogether. In some instances, particularly poorly behaved photographers have even trimmed nests, or rearranged them to get a better photo of the eggs or chicks. This of course leads to many problems for the nesting birds, including making the eggs, chicks, and even adults more visible to predators, as well as making them more susceptible to the elements. Other things that can cause issues in the pursuit of photographing birds include trespassing on private property, destroying habitat by trampling plants, and incessantly using playback to lure birds out into the open. Keep in mind too, it's not always just photographers doing these things, but also birders, and sometimes even general nature enthusiasts. While all of these things certainly harm birds, it's worth noting that these cases do not mean that all photographers are to blame. Many photographers, hopefully the majority of them, are respectful when viewing wildlife and don't go to extremely damaging levels to get photos. Furthermore, many bird photographers are integral in getting people interested in birding and wildlife. Seeing an up-close photo of a cool bird has undoubtedly ignited a spark of curiosity in many different people. I'm always reminded of this when I think about some of my earlier experiences as a kid, looking through books at the library containing photos of wildlife that I could only see on paper. In regards to the snowy owl at the Saxon Bog, it's unclear how much or how little impact birders or photographers had on its death. It's possible that it was sick, or maybe the cause did have to deal with a barrage of paparazzi spending too much time watching it. Either way, it does provide an opportunity to talk about ethics when both birding and taking photos. Some tips include keeping a fair distance away from wildlife, doing your best not to disturb the habitat around wildlife, and not spending too much time watching sensitive species. Particularly with owls, if they're staring directly at you and making themselves extremely thin or extremely puffy, this is a sign of distress, and you should back away immediately and leave the area. Remember the saying, a sleepy owl is a happy owl. Another thing I would add is to continue to help educate others on the proper ways to avoid causing harm to birds and other wildlife, while also not condemning people making honest mistakes. At some point in everyone's birding or photography journey, they have probably made a mistake or two, whether knowing it or not. At the end of the day, is bird photography bad for birds? When done with the bird's well-being in mind, absolutely not. But just like everything in life, there will continue to be those that cross the line, and when that happens, the reputation of the community as a whole can sometimes be put in the crosshairs of those looking for someone to blame. Do you have more tips to help people observe nature ethically? Do you have any stories of people behaving poorly to get photos or better looks at birds? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Badgerland Birding.